Hey, what's up? This is JM, host of the Celebrity Grill podcast on iTunes, and you're listening to the BBQ Central Radio Network. All barbecue and grilling, all the time.
Let's go!
We'll do it live. Okay. Well, do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and... Oh, should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
Welcome to the Really Big BBQ Central Show, a show that talks about all things important in the world of barbecue and grilling, but you knew that. And it's the fourth Tuesday of the month, and that means we're wrapping up the origin stories. Tonight promises to be perhaps way longer than 2 hours. Derrick Riches coming up in just a few seconds. Rusty Monson leads the second hour, and when we're done with Rusty, we will get in with Doug Scheiding. John Solberg is off this evening, but don't worry, we will catch up with him. We just wish him and his family well. John, we're thinking about you. And I'll leave it at that. Without any further ado, we race to the hotline and bring back friend of the show and BBQ Central Show guest Hall of Famer Derrick Riches. Hey, Derrick.
Hey, Greg. How you doing?
I am fine, and man, I'm excited to have you as we get ready to wrap up the month of origin stories. I didn't necessarily plan it like this, but I thought, why don't we go through and get the whole kit and caboodle of these regular guests, and if it proves to be something that's interesting, maybe I'll start tracking down some of the other barbecue luminaries and doing these bonus content type things. So we'll close out the month strong with you here in the first hour. So we'll get in the first handful of minutes here. We'll break, and then we'll get into the two longer interview segments as normal. So talk to us right from the beginning, Derrick. When were you born, and where were you born?
I was born a long time ago.
Join the club. Longer every year, right?
Actually, my birthday was Saturday.
Really? Happy birthday. Yeah. All right.
1966.
All right.
I was born on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, Utah.
So you were a Utah born and bred, pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
I think we go back about 4 generations there. So,
same place, or like within the same region, or did you move up and down the state?
Did I move around?
Well, I mean, like the family of 4 generations.
Yeah, not far. No, they did not. These were not people that went anywhere.
All right. Nice.
I think I don't think, I mean, it's like my dad died probably 5 miles from where he was born.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
They're not travelers.
Well, I get that. So what was family life like growing up for you before the high school years, those formative years of a young Derrick Riches ankle biter running around?
Grew up kind of like in a little house. It was like right on the edge of the Wasatch Mountains. About a 15-minute walk, you'd be at a trailhead. So you could just, take off, go hiking. So a lot of my childhood was spent, in the mountains and traveling, around there, fishing, hiking, hunting. You note from when my birthday is, most of my birthdays as a kid were spent at deer hunt. I mean,
right.
So, that was kind of the extent of that.
Is that a different life growing up? I mean, I certainly wasn't near any big city as I was growing up. From what I can recollect, Saratoga Springs, New York, so upstate New York. Certainly I was around mountains, but no real ass mountains like you were around.
Yeah, those are hills.
Right. So is it something that as you talk to people and get to know them, they have similar life experiences growing up in that kind of an area, or are you more the exception to the rule?
I don't know. I mean, most of the people that, I grew up with, that was a big thing. It's like, they used to always they literally, I mean, like the opening day of deer hunt was an actual holiday. I mean, it's not an official one, but everything was closed, and the schools would close because no one would be there. So, the outdoors was a really big part of just your life. And, everybody had campers and RVs and tents and stuff. And, people would clear out on the weekends. As a kid, it was kind of weird, particularly around, in the summer and stuff. I mean, if you were home on a Saturday and you went to the store, there was nobody there, versus now it's just like, always packed on the weekends. Sure. But it's just because everybody cleared out. There was more congestion Friday nights getting out of town than there was, during rush hour. It was just kind of the way it was back then. It's changed. It changed a lot over my lifetime because just, the whole area became much more urbanized, and, people just don't do that sort of thing, I guess, anymore.
Were you from a house, Derrick, where your parents stayed together while you were growing up?
Yeah. My parents were both divorced before they married each other.
Wow.
So I have
that's kind of a different I mean, it certainly wasn't commonplace, back then. I mean, if they were both divorced and then, married, I mean, that's not something that you heard about a lot back then.
Yeah, I was kind of an exception. I mean, I grew up in the not Mormon kid in a very Mormon neighborhood and
state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
No, it was worse in other places, but I mean, so it was, I had a very odd family. I mean, I used to always say that I have 2.5 siblings, and I actually have 2 brothers named Mike.
Really?
So, it's.
So was the family dynamic one of a blended family coming in? Like your parents had kids respectively, or did they have some together?
Well, I'm the only kid they had together.
Okay.
My dad had 3 kids, but I wasn't raised with them, and we were never close. I didn't really know them very well. My mom had 2 boys, and I grew up with them, but they were a lot older than I was. So by the time I was about 10, they kind of moved on. And after that, I was just kind of like the kid alone.
What kind of a age span are we looking at from the oldest combined child down to you?
The oldest is like 12 years older than I am.
All right.
But they're all very close in age. So the youngest is about 8 years older than I am. So, you have 5 kids in 4 years, but from 2 different families. So yeah, I was kind of the odd one out. I was always the little brother, the one that got thrown out windows or tied up and left, so
the guinea pig.
I wouldn't get in the way of things. Yeah.
So I mean, I would assume you were closest with your brothers, but as time has worn on, have those relationships just kind of faded, or has there been more of a concerted reconnection as you had gotten older to maintain ties?
I'm not really in a lot of contact with my siblings. You
okay with that? No problem with that?
Yeah, I have no problem with it. They're very different from me. So, I mean, I have a brother who is a professor of epidemiology.
Wow.
And yeah.
I'm assuming he's pretty busy, right?
I would assume he's had a busy year. I haven't talked to him, but I'm sure he's busy. So, and another one, I don't really know what he's up to now. I think he kind of sort of retired or something. He's done all sorts of crazy jobs over the years. So,
your parents still around?
No, see, my dad broke the cardinal rule of military service. Back in May of 1952, he was stationed at Clovis Air Force Base in New Mexico, where he basically spent all day smoking cigarettes under a fuel truck, waiting for B-29s to land. that, that would take off from Clovis, fly up to the Arctic Circle and back.
Yeah.
With their nuclear payload, because it's the 1950s.
Right.
And an officer came around and asked for volunteers, and he said, okay, why not? And so he got put in a cargo plane and flown to the Nevada nuclear test site. So he was actually witness to one of the last airdropped above ground nuclear tests on U.S. soil.
Wow.
So that shortened his lifespan quite a bit.
Yeah.
He never really got leukemia or anything. He never got cancer. No one in his family's ever had cancer. I just don't have the genes for it, I guess. But it just messed with his DNA. He just aged faster and faster as time went by. And my mom died almost 5 years ago. So
we're going to take our first break here, and then we'll come back and talk about high school and getting into college here. So stand by. We're talking with Derrick Riches, getting his origin story. Don't forget in the second hour, Rusty Monson, one of the embedded correspondents, one of the newest, or the newest, and then Doug Scheiding after him. Quickly, before we get back with Derrick, I'll talk to you about Pits and Spits. Since 1983, handcrafting smokers and grills in Houston, Texas. In that time, Pits and Spits has established itself as one of the premier brands in high-quality offset smokers, and more recently in pellet cookers, setting itself apart by using heavy 7 and 10-gauge steel in every cooker, fully welded construction that you can feel when you use the unit. 3 or 4 stainless roll-top lid and a front shelf on every single smoker. Why does that matter? Well, by using higher quality materials, Pits and Spits smokers reach and maintain temperatures, allowing you to worry more about the meat than the heat, providing a fully welded smoker that you don't have to worry about grease and smoke leaking out of the barrel. You don't have to worry about that grill rattling apart as you move it through the backyard as well. 3 or 4 stainless steel means you're getting an heirloom quality product that you can pass down to your kids as well. Now, while some companies focus on the low-cost provider sector, Pits and Spits focuses on craftsmanship and using quality materials. Are there cheaper ways to make these pits? Yes, but they don't like tack welds, cheap stainless, and electronics that you can't trust. Having in-house manufacturing gives them complete control of their design and standards. That's not something you're going to find in products brought in from overseas. Their steel suppliers supply material to be used in some of the harshest environments around, so they will perform in any and all conditions, and their controllers are made here right in the USA. So they're able to have unimpeded transparency into the programming. Pits and Spits is a dealer of a network of dealers across the country. If there isn't one close to you, call them at the shop, 844-650-6250. That's 844-650-6250, whether you're in the backyard or your competition team. Pits and Spits has the right product for you. You can check them out on their website, all spelled out, Pits and Spits. That's double T's on both sides, pitsandspits.com, or see their Pits in the Wild across all social media handles, at Pits and Spits, all spelled out as well. Or Derrick Riches coming up shortly. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the #1 most downloaded barbecue and grilling podcast anywhere. The BBQ Central Show. Broadcasting live from the BBQ Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the BBQ Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by Butcher's Barbecue, makers of award-winning spices, rubs, marinades, grilling oils, everything that you need to be a successful pitmaster. Tried and true on the competition trail and in backyards. Stock up now over at butcherbbq.com. That's butcherbbq.com. Always trust your butcher. And we're back with Derrick Riches. Derrick, thanks for hanging with me through the break there.
Sure
All right,
thing.
so let's talk about, I guess let me ask you quickly, since your dad had kind of passed prematurely, I guess you're speculating that the above-ground nuclear test that he was witness to might have had a hand in that. So when he passes away, sooner than expected, how does that affect you?
Well, I mean, by sooner than expected, it wasn't I mean, I was about 30. So, and it was something we knew was coming for a long time. Just, he'd been to every doctor and they basically like, well, it's radiation damage just over a very long period of time. And, so, that's just, the way that is. Would have been nice if, there had been a compensation package or something for that, but they, somehow they lost all his military records in a big fire in St. Louis, Missouri.
Ironic.
Yeah. Ironic. Yeah. Almost everyone who was witness to a nuclear test had their records there.
And
Strange.
and
What a
up it went.
coincidence.
That's right.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, hard to imagine that. Derrick, what was high school like when you get into there? I mean, that can be a tough time for a lot of folks, but how were the high school years for you, and what were you into?
I was, kind of, again, being the not Mormon kid in an extremely Mormon part of the world, I tended to be the kid that your parents warned you about, but for no other reason than the fact that I just didn't go to the church they all did.
Uh-huh.
So, I just, high school was largely uneventful, but I just kind of, I guess in a way I kind of played into that a little bit. I got into punk music and was kind of rebellious, but I got really good grades, so nobody complained about anything.
No sports or any extracurriculars like that?
No, I was, when I was really little, I had rheumatic fever. And it was really bad. And kind of one of the long-term side effects of that is that you can suffer from kind of long-term joint pain. So a lot of my teenage years, it's like my knees were just always in pain. So anytime I did anything athletic, I would just go home, put ice packs in my knees for hours. And so I didn't really get involved in a lot of that.
No other clubs or anything outside of sports?
No.
Yep.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I was, we had an electronics class that I did a lot of stuff in there in high school and did a lot of, built radios and did a lot of, 80s level technology.
What year are you getting out of high school then?
I graduated in 85.
85, all right. So good grades, leaving at 85. Are you adept at going right to college at that point, or what was the mindset as you're leaving high school then?
I just kind of went straight into college. I went to the University of Utah, which was about 15 miles away. I got a job up there, and as opposed to today, tuition was very reasonable, and so I just kind of stayed in college for like 8 years.
Nice. Were you going in with a major in mind, or were you going in to see where the wind blew you? Well,
I mean, I kind of went in with the idea of electrical engineering. And after about 2 years of that, decided it was way too much work for what I was willing to put in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the math and the physics and the chemistry and then the engineering courses. Plus, you're competing, I was working a lot and, competing with kids who are on scholarship and, who don't have to do anything else but study. And I had to do all these other things. So, I just, decided I'm just going to take whatever interests me. So there's about 6 years of that.
So do you graduate from college?
Yeah. I have a bachelor's in history and a bachelor's in philosophy.
Wow, worthless.
Yeah, I was close to. I mean, if I'd been willing to go back for a second year of calculus, I could have done the bachelor's in mathematics. But I mean,
all of those majors reek of you're going to teach somewhere. I worthless, yeah. I say tongue in cheek, because to me that's like you're doing that because maybe you're not passionate about something specific and you've just accumulated credits like you have, or you're taking those because you know that I want to get out of here and this is a class I want to teach. in middle school or high school or get a master's and then go into the collegiate level or something along these lines?
I am not. I'm not generally a very good teacher when it comes to something like that. I'm too unstructured in the way I do things. So yeah, I had no aspirations of teaching ever.
So taking the long-term college route, which by the way I wholeheartedly agree with on many different levels, especially back then, even when I went to college at OU, I paid for the last year because I was on the 5-year plan. My parents paid for the first 4 years. I paid for the 5th year. I think all in for the year, I took a loan out for $5,500. My daughter goes to a Division II school right now out east of Pittsburgh. It's $52,000 a year. So, from 97 to, 2019 when she started, it's a dramatic increase all across the board. Division II, 3, Division I, you name it, state school, private school, what have you. However, you've also mentioned that you've worked through college. So that's a whole different chain of responsibility there because you are holding down a job and making money, I would assume, to help offset the cost of college. But then you also have your study responsibilities as well. So what jobs are you holding down through that time?
Several things. What I did is I got jobs that part of the benefit of the job was half off of your tuition. So I could pay as I went. I could actually make enough money, to support myself and come up with the, tuition money. So when I graduated, I had no loans. I had none of that sort of stuff. So that was good that way. Before I started college, I worked for a year as a bicycle mechanic when I was in high school. And then I worked in the Fine Arts Museum for a while. And then I worked in their main research library, and that kind of just evolved into, when I graduated, I just kind of went from what I was doing into an IT position there. So, I was doing okay. I mean, I wasn't raking in money, but I was getting by.
So that was the first job out of college then, technically, was an IT job?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you think you were going to be in IT going forward at that point, or did you know it was a job versus a career and there were other callings for you?
Well, I mean, I didn't there's certain things I didn't like about it. I mean, there were times when, work shift was 24 straight hours because there was something wrong. I mean, I was doing network administration for a department that had horribly underfunded its network for years. And so it was just cobbled together crap. And, it was a lot of time fixing what was there while trying to build something that would actually work. And, as time went by, I just lost any passion for it. I know how computers work at this point, but I'm not really interested in working on them.
Yeah.
It's just, it was a lot of work, and it was like, some people are like, oh, well, you're a professional and you're doing a professional position, and other people like, you're kind of janitorial, you fix stuff sort of thing. And it's like, I don't need this. I really don't. So, I was always kind of trying to figure out something else to do.
So at some point there's the tipping mindset where you're at the job and you're not going to be there. So are you now on the lookout for something else, or how does the next job transition happen? In the 90s, when all the .com started coming up, I was trying to work to get positions into, some of these tech companies, these startups, stuff like that. But, a lot of them, it was like relocate to Palo Alto and maybe you can get on a list to get into a position, or, if you lived in New York City, we might be able to find something for you. I did a
couple of, kind of side projects here and there for a while. But, nothing really ever panned out. And, I was really consistently picking losers that would die in the bubble burst, in 2000. So, if I knew then what I know now, I think I probably could have picked a better path, but it was kind of hit and miss with all of that.
If I could back it up just for a second, as you get through high school, and I guess, did you come back home every now and again through college like, normal kids would do, breaks and whatnot? Or once you were at college, did you pretty much stay out there?
Well, I went home on Sunday to do my laundry.
Oh yeah, because you were like 10
my
miles
parents
from
were
home.
15
That's
miles
right.
away.
That's right.
Or if I was really hungry.
Yeah. So what's the food scene for you like back then? Are you somebody that is being brought into the kitchen, or are you bringing yourself into the kitchen to see how food is made? Is your family not necessarily a culinary family per se? How did it look like for you?
I wouldn't say that either of my parents are very good cooks. My mother had a very basic education in English cooking from, like her mother and her grandmother, with a couple of Danish dishes thrown in there, but that was pretty much all she knew. And my dad knew nothing about cooking. But, when I was a teenager, my dad was, actually from when I was pretty young, probably from 10 onward, my dad became an avid gardener. We lived on a pretty big plot of land, and he carved out this massive garden. And so every fall he would, it would be like, harvest everything, and everything got, canned or frozen or whatever. So, I grew up on homemade pickles and salsa, tomato sauces. My mother made a pretty good tomato jam. I would really like to have another jar of that if I could get it. Pretty much anything you can buy in a pre-made in a can today, they made and just canned themselves at home. So that was kind of like the culinary world for me, was that sort of canning and food preserving process. The 3 days it took to make a year's worth of pickles, the day that I would spend grinding tomatoes so we could make salsa. And everywhere, all of it, every ingredient that went into it, corn, green beans, every type of squash you can imagine. He grew potatoes. I don't know why anyone would grow potatoes, because they're really cheap to buy. But, there's a certain survivalist mentality in him. And I think he just felt that, why buy if you can make it yourself?
Sure.
We just didn't have chickens. I think that would have been it. Would have been kind of the whole thing if he'd raised chickens.
Was there any?
We also lived on venison and stuff like that quite a bit.
Oh, I was going to say, with the hunt that you were talking about, I'm sure game was a fairly big portion of it. Was there any live fire introduction for you at that point?
Oh, well, yeah. But it was, all along, because there was always campfire cooking. And my dad had this 1930-something Coleman stove that he'd got from his dad that, whenever we'd go camping or, whatever, he'd cook everything on. But yeah, a lot of just like campfire cooking. Mm-hmm. The stuff you throw in the fire and the stuff you cook over the fire, we would do that. We'd go, like when we'd go fishing, catch trout and, just clean them and cook them and eat them as they were coming out of the water a lot of times. So, so that was always that element.
All right.
Plus my dad actually invented barbecue. So
thank God.
If
let's leave that as an aside.
Okay. We'll leave that aside for a minute, but it's an interesting story.
How has one become so lucky to have their dad be the one credited for inventing barbecue?
I didn't say he was the first person to invent barbecue.
Oh, no.
He invented it independently on his own.
Oh.
So, like I said, we lived on a big plot of land, And it had once been an orchard. So it was cherry trees and apricot trees.
Nice.
And they were all ancient, because this was this orchard had been planted in like the 19th century. And so we always had tons of fruit wood, and we just, burned it. Firewood, fireplace, whatever.
Right.
But when I was a little kid, the guy who lived next door to us had been a commander in the U.S. Navy. And he'd been stationed in Japan in the 60s, and he had brought back with him this weird big ceramic green thing that he called a hibachi. And when he moved, he was like, well, this thing's so fragile and it's been shipped around so much, because he'd brought it back on an aircraft. He'd had it smuggled on an aircraft carrier to get it from Japan. I mean, he was a commander, so he had some clout, I guess.
Sure. So
he just gave it to my dad. And so my dad was like, well, it's a grill, just grill on it. But what my dad kind of realized was, this is my dad again. He doesn't buy stuff. You don't have to buy charcoal when there's all this wood lying around. You just need to get the wood burning in the grill itself and just burn that. So, he didn't buy charcoal. And he also realized that, if you kind of adjusted this thing right, you could cook almost anything on it. You could cook at lower temperatures. You could roast on it. It wasn't just grilling steaks. And so he just kind of played around with the idea of it. So I grew up eating roasts, and it was like chuck roast or pork loin roast or stuff like that he would cook on this, but he realized that the longer he cooked it, the more tender it was. So he would just kind of dial it down and let it cook all day long. And then that's what we would eat. And, he didn't know what barbecue was. I mean,
he's inventing it right there, pretty much.
He's never been east. The farthest east he's ever been is Chicago.
Yeah.
And that was, just to fly to Chicago. And other than that, the edge of the Rocky Mountains was about as far as he would go, because he hated flatland so much. So, years later, I'm like 20 and I'm visiting a friend down in Austin, Texas. And I get off the plane. He's like, all right, we're going to go get you some barbecue. And he's like, you've never eaten anything like this before in your life. And I'm kind of like, well, actually, it's kind of like the way my dad used to cook a lot. I mean, it's similar. So, that's kind of where I got introduced to barbecue. Was not barbecue, but something very similar to it. And then when I actually got to try barbecue, I was like, hey, this is actually quite good. I'd like to do more of this.
Very interesting story.
By that point, that big green hibachi thingy in my parents' backyard had disintegrated into a pile of.
I was going to say, is there any way that you have that somewhere? I mean,
I know. I would love to. I would love to still have it.
Oh, I bet.
I've tracked a few down online that are like in good condition, but the price and then the shipping is insane.
So, that's a really good introduction to barbecue, even though, who knew at the time that you were partaking in really a Southern delicacy that a lot of other people knew about, and your dad was learning it all on his own. We get back to kind of present day, as it were, at that period of time. So the professional side is, a little spotty per se. You don't really have a defined career path that you're rolling down yet, but I assume at some point there unfolds a love story. You get married, all that good stuff. So regale us, if you will, Derrick, of a love story between you and your wife, and how you meet and how that story unfolds. You're
actually assuming a lot, aren't you?
Sure. I love love. I mean, who doesn't love love?
Well, it's not like we talk a lot. So so I was working at the library at the university. I had not started working in IT. I was working in one of the management departments. And, I walk through one day and I see this young woman across, over in another department. I think it was like literally the first day she worked there. And I see her and I look at her and I knew right there. I mean, it was an epiphany. She is way out of my league.
Nice.
I mean,
knockout.
Yeah. I mean, so I just put that aside, put that straight out of my head because, dashed hopes are awful. So, but a couple of months later, we're kind of working together and we get talking and, I asked her out and she agreed. And the weird thing of it is the first place I took her was a barbecue joint.
In Utah?
Yeah, it was like the only one. It wasn't terribly authentic.
Yeah.
It was close. I mean, it was better than Tony Roma's. I'll put it at that. For those who remember Tony Roma's, they're not still around, are they?
Maybe in pockets, but I think most of them have dried up.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah, and everything proceeded very quickly from that point onward.
Like, how quickly are you dating to when you get married? Like, is it a year, like that kind of quick, or
it's like 6 months
from when you dated to you were married?
Yeah,
look at this guy, smooth operator. So you must have had some kind of rap going.
It's just everything was just perfect. Everything just was great. We got along amazingly well. We liked all the same stuff. Well, for the most part. We don't agree necessarily in music, but, aside from that, we have kind of similar personalities, similar outlooks, and we dated. Our first date was the beginning of February, and we got married at the end of August.
Wow. So do you get any static or do either of you get any static from the parents going, hey, maybe a little quick to the finish line here?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you even care anyway? Like, who cares?
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't care at all. She might have. Her parents weren't against it. I was 26. She was 22. So, she was a little young. But yeah, no, my parents were just, whatever.
Do you start having kids,
we got out the kids
fairly quickly then, or how does that work out?
Our daughter was born about a year and a half later.
All right. So you have a little honeymoon time there?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Is that the only kid you got?
Yeah.
All right. And she's the one that was like trapped in limbo or something a couple months ago from whatever was going on there.
She'd moved out to Boston a couple of years ago. She's 25 now. Kind of finish up her school stuff, and then her boyfriend was still in school at Boston and had like a semester to finish when everything shut down. Mm-hmm. And so Boston's rents are insane, and they closed all the school dorms and everything like that. So they kind of had to leave Boston, and but his parents lived down in Virginia. So that's where she is now.
Got it.
Kind of, I feel bad for, people in their 20s right now. Cause it's like, what do you do? If you can work, but it's kind of hard right now.
Growing up from a parental standpoint, how do you feel you and your wife were as parents raising a kid? Was that a enjoyable experience, or how do you look back on those 18 years before you turn her loose?
Well, you've done it a lot more than I have, so you probably have more insights than I do. Raising an only child might be different though, because they don't have anyone else to play with.
I can tell you that by the time the third one comes, you don't care.
I would assume. Yeah.
Oh, the baby fell on the floor? No problem.
Yeah. I think we tried to achieve that level of indifference quickly, but it didn't pan out entirely. But no, I think I don't know. I think we did an okay job. I think she's who she is.
Would you say she's a fierce, independent, strong woman and contributor to society?
She is definitely fierce and independent.
All right.
And she is also just an avid artist. And she has that artist personality, and from when she was little, 4 or 5, if there was some project that she wanted to get involved in, nothing else mattered. Food didn't matter, bed, sleep time didn't matter, nothing else mattered whatsoever. It had to be done. We bought we bought Scotch tape by the caseload because she would just tape everything, make these Scotch tape sculptures and paper and whatever she could find. And she still has that kind of passion. She'll just disappear for a couple of days, and it's because she's doing a painting. Nice. And no one is, the phone goes off and you can't talk to her. So it was a little weird when she moved away and you couldn't get in touch with her for a couple of days. Like, are you all right? And she'd pop up and go, why did you text me 67 times? Because it's been 4 days. Where have you been? I was painting. So she's like that.
Where does barbecue journalism start?
Okay, so my dad invented barbecue.
Wait a second. Before we get into that, let me do one more break here before we get into the barbecue stuff here. I apologize.
Okay.
And we'll come back and learn that story because, as we've learned here, Derrick's dad has invented barbecue, which is wonderful. SouthsideMarket.com is the place to go to get all your sausages and everything else that Southside makes. Their barbecued meats, briskets, and ribs, established in 1882. Oldest barbecue joint in Texas, owned and operated by the same family for 3 generations. Premium Central Texas barbecue products, slow smoked over real wood, shipping, distributing, manufacturing sausages for companies across the U.S. From food trucks to multi-chain restaurants, Southside sausage can be on your menu as well. All meats are processed in the on-site USDA-inspected facility. A trusted partner with a focus on quality and authenticity. Shipping nationwide via FedEx or through food service distribution channels, Sysco, U.S. Foods, and Martin Foods. Co-packaging capable from research and development to package completion. They can also follow your recipe or help you develop something brand new. Private label opportunities also available. SouthsideMarket.com is a place to go to shop online. 10% off all of your orders through that website. With promo code BBQ Central, all one word, lowercase. That's BBQ CENTRAL, BBQ Central. And that's 10% off at SouthsideMarket.com each and every time. All right, now we will get the live fire story from Derrick Riches. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the BBQ Central Show.
All right, the show brought to you by CookinPellets.com, COOKIN, CookinPellets.com, your number one resource for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. Again, that's CookinPellets.com. All right, Derrick, sorry to cut you off there as I teased everybody and then pulled it all away. It's what we do here in the biz. So, barbecue journalism, where does it start?
So like I had said, in the mid to late 90s, I'm kind of checking out a lot of these, .com companies. And I see a listing for a site for this new business. It's not it's not available. They're just starting up, and they're looking for people to, in essence, do kind of web development and curating for different topics. Now, like I said, in my early 20s, I had a friend who had moved. He was from Texas, and he had lived in Salt Lake for a while, and then he moved back. Was living in San Marcos, and I'd flown down and visited him and then driven out to Galveston because my brother was at medical school there. And so, I kind of got the taste for barbecue then. And then a few years later, I got married, and the first thing, my wife buys me a grill, and then I got one of those Brinkman. They used to call them the R2D2 units, a little Brinkman water smoker thing. And so I was making barbecue and all that sort of stuff. So this company, they're advertising for people to curate topics. And I tried out for punk music, but some snot-nosed kid who doesn't know jack beat me to it. So I tried out for their barbecue and grilling topic. And they're like, hey, you can do this. And it was like, their goal in life was to be, okay. So, back in the late 90s, Yahoo was everything. If you wanted to find something on the internet, you went to Yahoo.
Yes.
They were going to be the intelligent Yahoo. They were going to have experts in fields curate the websites that were listed in there and kind of provide explanation, supplementary information. And they had a bunch of startup money. So they were like, hey, you do this, 10, 15 hours a month, just kind of putting stuff together, going through and doing this. We'll give you $200. So I'm like, hey, why not?
A month?
So I started. Yeah, I know it wasn't a lot of money, but the thing of it is that the job I had kept me kind of in a space for a long period of time, but took about 3 to 4 hours a day to do it. So I had to be there for 8 hours, but I had a lot of time to kill and unlimited internet access and computer access. So I just said, okay, I can do this. They give me $200 a month. So I started doing it. And I don't know, about a year or so goes by. The thing goes public. People can start reading stuff. And I started getting questions from people. They're emailing me and they're asking me which grill to buy. And I have no idea. I don't know anything. I mean, I have a grill and I've used a couple of different grills. My parents had one of the first year Genesis from Weber. I'd used a bunch of other stuff. So I just start researching stuff and I'm answering people's questions thinking, okay, this is what you do. So then I start compiling all this information together and start putting it out on the website. And I'm kind of the first person to do this. Nobody.
What year is this exactly?
Well, I started doing product information in 98.
Oh, okay.
And really, really ramped up in 99 and 2000. It was really preliminary in 98. But, nobody else had that kind of information. There just wasn't anything anywhere unless you were going to go buy a copy of, Consumer Reports. You couldn't go online and see any of it because Consumer Reports wasn't online in those days. And so traffic just started pouring in. Well, this company I started working for became something called About.com, and they started paying per page view. And at first, they were way overpaying. They totally overestimated how much ad revenue they could generate. So they had made commitments to pay a pretty substantial amount of money, and I started just generating a lot of traffic. By the time they start going, hey, we have to cut back on how much we're paying per page view, affiliate marketing had come up. So we could do Amazon affiliate marketing and, through other, through a number of other companies and like that. So, I don't know, 1 in 500 people would buy a grill that was looking at the site, but I was generating 20 million pages a month at one point. And
are you making, is About.com paying you $1 million a year?
No. I probably made them $1 million a year, but they only paid me half of what I made them.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to deal with servers. I didn't have to do design work.
Right.
I didn't have
You were just the brains.
Management. I didn't have to do any of the structural work. All I had to do was sit down and go in the system and write content. So I could just, that's all I had to focus on. When you have to run your own website, and you have to do all the technical stuff yourself. That can, consume 3 days for some stupid thing one day.
There's an hourly rate assessed to that eats back at your growth. Yeah.
And the company got bought by the New York Times. And so I was using New York Times press credentials to travel with. So I call it Memphis in May, say, hey, I'm with the New York Times Corporation and I want to come to Memphis in May. And, can I get a press pass? And they're like, yeah, we'll give you full VIP passes and, someone who will run around with you if you need it. You want a cart to drive you around. I'm like, no, I'm good. But,
good
getting
perks.
into trade shows and the perks were great, but there's the other side of it. And that is that, you have to do all of this research on product information, and every 3 years, Weber would completely revamp its entire line of products. Charcoal 1 year, gas grills the next year, then, everything else the year after that. Charbroil just changes everything every year. And so you had to keep up on all that. So, I was doing well. I had good perks, I had good pay, and I was working 80 hours a week.
So that's a time commitment on your part for the most, or are you also making expenditures out of your own in order to make sure that you're getting everything? I assume you could reach out and say, this is who I am, and send me all your stuff, and they're happy to do it. But I would also assume that there is a potential of conflict of interest if somebody wanted to dig down and say, oh, well, they're giving it to you, and are you really going to be honest in a review on something that you've gotten for free?
That's a really hard line, because you're right. Companies would contact me and say, hey, here's our product catalog, what do you want? Other companies, you contact them and say, I'm looking for demo units, or I'm looking for this or that. Some of them would just say, screw you, we don't want to deal with you. And some of them would be like, yeah, okay, we can arrange for that. All I can really say is that, I put all the information that I could get out of a product into a database. Tested everything out I could, and then I let the database tell me if it was good or not. I basically wrote algorithms to say, well, this actually comes out on top because it scores better the way you're rating it. Maybe I haven't always come up with the best system of determining that, but a lot of people have called me out over the years, but I go in and I say, okay, why, what's the problem, and why did I miss something, or are they missing something? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's me, and so I would go back and say, okay, let's reevaluate this and see what I can do with it. I have a lot of relationships with, people in the business. The people that I've known for 20 years. Sometimes I love their products and sometimes I don't. And the really good people to work with are the ones that will go, yeah, you don't necessarily like our products, but we like what you're doing for the business. Because my goal has always been, when I'm writing something, I'm addressing the first time person, first time someone buys a grill, first time someone buys a smoker, first time someone tries to cook a steak, and I go, if you're successful at that, if you get the thing that works best for you, if you have a satisfying experience with either your new cooker or your new cooking method or whatever, you're going to come back. You're going to go, hey, this was good information, but I'm going to do more of this. It's awful when somebody buys, a crappy product. It does not work and they're done. They're not cooking outdoors anymore. They're like, no. And it was too much work. It was, those late night Ronco commercials were right. Grilling is too hard to do. Charcoal explodes. It kills people.
Causes cancer.
Causes cancer. It pesters the neighbor's dogs. It does all sorts of horrible things. I'm just not, for me, it's if a person has a good experience, they're going to do more of it. And that grows the business. It grows what all of us do. And, with any luck, they'll come back to me for more answers or more information or more ideas. And that's kind of always been my way of looking at it. If you put the consumer first, then the companies are going to have to deal with you. The manufacturers. I mean, I'm not saying people haven't tried to sue me. And I'm not saying that there's a certain person that actually threatened to kill me. But
really?
Yeah.
Name them.
I know. No.
Really?
Yeah. And it was a
what does their
show.
name sound like? What does it rhyme with?
Herman Tin.
I think we first came together while you were at about.com. But over time that has evolved. I think the next time it was the spruce.com, and eventually you've landed at derrickriches.com. So how does that track run?
I think that there came an idea in the company. There was a group of us. I mean, at one point they had over 1,000 of us writing for the company.
Wow.
And we were specialists in everything you could conceive of. I mean, we would have these big conferences in New York, and, they'd rent out all this stuff and spend, $1 million, and we would get together and have a week of stuff. And there was probably not a question someone could think of that the people in that room didn't know the answer to. I mean, just an incredibly smart group of people. And some of them were doing incredible business, $1 million a year. And, and I think they just got this idea. It's like, hey, we have people who are making money on something they wrote 10 years ago, and we're still paying them for it. And why are we doing that? So they decided they wanted to go a different direction. And they also felt that they would make a lot more money in advertising if their product reviews had a certain, how do you put it, incentive from the manufacturer built in.
Uh-huh.
So some of the top 10 lists, some of the, the best of the best, well, there are items on that list that are paid to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I refused to do that. I wasn't going to be part of it. So I just kind of like, all right, I'm going to write my way out and quietly, and I'm going to go off and do my own thing for a while. And that's kind of the way it went. I basically retired for about a year, but I have written 10,000 pieces of content over the years. And some of it is scattered across a dozen different websites. I mean, half of it still has my name on it. Half of it doesn't, but it's out there, and I thought, I've got tons of stuff. So why don't I just put a bunch together and just play with it a little bit? I don't have to deal with the don't offend someone ideas that I used to have to,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I want to call out a company and say, hey, you're screwing up and here's what's wrong with you, then, I can be a little bit more vocal about that. I can be a little bit more of an advocate that way. And not have to worry about, someone in corporate going, hey, what's the deal with this? I mean, not that they really ever did, but, I mean, someone at Charbroil told about.com bosses that I was on the board of directors of Weber.
Oh, good for you.
And that's what I know. I'm like, one, at the time, it was still family owned. So I would have to have actually married my way in to be on the board of directors. Two, they didn't really have a board of directors. Three, if I was on the board of directors, I would have quit all of that a long time ago because I would be making so much money, particularly when the company sold. But, those are pesky things you have to explain to .com overlords every once in a while, and usually they're like, okay, we get it, you're not crooked, they're crazy. So, but now I don't have to worry about that sort of stuff, and I can just be me and set my own schedule and not work 80 hours a week.
There was a time that you had stopped doing my show, partly, maybe solely, because there was, I don't know if you would call it a competition, or maybe there was just a differing opinion on your site at the time. I don't know if it was about.com or not, or bbq.about.com, and Amazing Ribs, and who was bigger, who was badder, blah, blah, blah. As a host, having access to both you and Meathead, it was great for me because you guys were similar, but obviously worlds apart in a number of different facets. Has that resolved itself in any way, or like have you talked at all, or is it just like it's open and it's just over with, but it's still open, or how does that? Where does that sit in 2020?
I greatly respect what he's done. I mean, he's put together something absolutely amazing. I mean, he's really good at marketing, something I'm not good at. And he's very compelling. But we have you're right. We have a very different style about things and some differences of opinions. We used to talk quite a bit. Mm-hmm. We, emailed back and forth, talked on the phones. As a matter of fact, at one point, we had some discussion about me taking over all the product related content for Amazing Ribs.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. It wasn't terribly lucrative at the time. I mean, it would have become quite lucrative probably. I mean, I don't really know what kind of money he does. But it became a logistical issue.
Sure.
It was just my time and the fact that I would, in essence, have to write everything twice when I didn't have enough time to write everything once. And so, I just kind of like, we negotiated it out, we talked it out, and I was like, this I think would be a great opportunity, and maybe I'm dumb for not pursuing it, but and I don't have any regret about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were communicating when he was still just Craig, back in the earliest days of Amazing Ribs. So, if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't. I did extraordinarily well, and I'm proud of the work I did, and I'm proud of the work I do now. But I just have a different lifestyle at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in, killing myself. Literally, I just can't imagine, doing that into my 60s, being that, driven and traveling that much and doing all the things I did, when I was in my 40s. So, I have a different life now. I want to have fun with that. Barbecue should be enjoyable, and I want to enjoy it. That's kind of where I'm at in my life.
So I guess the last question I have isn't the best question for the answer that you just gave, which was, do you see yourself not doing this at some point? So I guess the better question revised is, when do you see yourself getting out of this now?
That's a really good question.
I had to have one.
Yeah.
And it was a revision on the fly, I might add. Thank you very much. I'll be here next hour. Thank you. Go ahead.
I can, I do see myself kind of not doing this. And I have been working on a couple of other projects.
Industry related?
Let's say slanted instead of kind of the same sort of thing. But nothing, with any luck, if I can keep up to my own schedule, we'll have something to talk about in about 6 months.
Oh, great. All right.
But that's the best I can tell you right now.
Well, the best that I can tell everybody right now on my side is you go to DerrickRiches.com and read everything that he's putting up there, because it's always compelling and it's always unbiased. As I like to say, at least in my opinion, one of the most respected live fire journalists, if not the only live fire journalist out there right now. And you can find him on this show, the fourth Tuesday of every month. And that is Derrick Riches' origin story. Derrick, hopefully this has at least met expectation. Maybe you didn't have any expectations going in, which maybe was probably a better idea. But I think it's always important here to show that the folks that I'm talking to, especially in this day and age, there's a very quick turn a coin to say it just happened overnight or they were lucky. And I could have also lucked into that as well. But when you get the actual history and run back, you see that there has been any number of years and decades involved in getting into the successful position that you guys are in now, and the folks that I have here on the show. And secondarily, we had a really good run the first time, and I was always disheartened when you decided to step away from the show, and I respected the reasons that you were stepping away from the show. But the fact that we were able to reconnect and start doing this once a month again has been a real joy for me, because I really respect what you do, and I like the slant that you bring to the show. And again, it seems that the regular guys and gals that I have here on the show, I've actually met in person, and it's only been once, maybe twice. But we have met in person too. So I just want you to know that I appreciate you and what you bring to the show every month, and thanks for doing it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Greg. I appreciate it. It's nice to have something like this.
It's my pleasure, and we will see you in November, if you can believe it. My goodness. All right, there he is, Derrick Riches. Hopefully you enjoyed getting Derrick's origin story. That was fantastic. A lot of stuff there that I didn't know about. And Rusty Monson is in already. So let me do this as we wrap up the first hour. Got to do this for podcast stuff. Green Mountain Grills. Do you like those? Yes. Rusty Monson cooks all his chicken on Green Mountain Grills, believe it or not. That's all he cooks on it. Go to greenmountaingrills.com and you can check out the Choice line and the Prime line. They have a host of accessories as well. They sell through dealers, so go to greenmountaingrills.com and see where the nearest dealer is to you. And then go to that store, if they allow you, and check out all the products. They are trained and will answer all your questions, so you have immediate experience right out of the gate. Again, that's greenmountaingrills.com. greenmountaingrills.com, and we are back to get Rusty Monson's origin story right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.